Hey there. Today I want to take a look at some of the differences between the 1995 New American Standard Bible and the upcoming Legacy Standard Bible. The Legacy Standard Bible is coming from a team who I believe are mostly at Master's Seminary, and they are seeking to make a more literal translation of the Bible than the NASB, which is already deemed one of the most literal translations there is in print. Now, their publisher has just released a PDF of the Gospel of Mark, and so I thought I'd use Mark chapter 1 as a comparison just to see how much more literal the LSB truly is. Let's take a look. I think the first thing which is apparent is that this is actually quite a light revision of the NASB. We're not dealing with a large revision such as from the RSV to either the ESV or the NRSV, but what we've got is much more of a slight touch-up. And these touch-ups seem to reflect perhaps a more consistent style which the translators are seeking to bring across. And what is also clear is that these touch-ups are often bringing across words which were either skipped in the NASB because they were deemed too repetitive, or were translated in a more non-literal form. One of the things which is quite apparent about the Book of Mark when you read it in Greek is common use of the particle kai. Now, the Book of Mark was designed to be read in Koine Greek. One way to put it in English is if you were going, and then this happened, and then that happened, and immediately this, and immediately they. Now, most Bible translations will skip those ands as they deem them too repetitive. But as we can see, especially from verses 18 onwards, the LSB has added back those ands. So it is even more word for word to the original Greek than the NASB is. We can see as we scroll through that most of these translational choices are very straightforward. There doesn't seem to be any real textual differences, at least for this first chapter of Mark. I notice that some of the tenses are being cleared up. We take in verse 27, and they debated. This is changed to were arguing. Now that is present tense in the original language. And yes, debated can be used. And I believe when I read the sentence over in the NASB, it seemed to project a present tense. But they decided that it would be more easier to make it more explicit with were arguing among themselves. They've also retained many of the titles of the NASB, but they've tweaked them slightly. So here we've got the title above verse 29 in chapter 1, crowds healed, to Simon's mother-in-law, and many others were healed. Okay, the titles are not in the text, so it's neither here nor there, but it's an interesting change. There is some word order differences, particularly in verse 39, where in the NASB we have, and he went into their synagogues throughout all Galilee, preaching and casting out the demons, whereas the LSB has rearranged it to be, and he went, preaching in their synagogues throughout all Galilee and casting out the demons. Another interesting change is you'll see the use of italics in verse 40 for the name Jesus. Now in verse 40 and 41, the word Jesus does not appear in the original Greek. It looks like here in verse 40 they patched up what they saw was the NASB not marking a particular word as being implied from the translation, And then later in 41, they went for the more literal he rather than Jesus. Now, of course, the he still is Jesus. And to me, this just shows the care which they are showing in trying to be a more literal translation than the NASB. And I think as we reach the end of Mark 1, that's perhaps the point of the LSB. We now have a more literal translation than the NASB, and perhaps this will be the niche for the Legacy Standard Bible. That it's not just a holdout for those who do not like the new gendered brothers and sisters being used in the more modern Bibles, such as the NASB 2020 and the NIV 2011. It's not just for that rather conservative holdout, but it's for those who desire a truly more literal Bible to preach from and have their congregations follow along in the sermon. I hope you've found this video useful. Please let me know in the comments if I've missed anything or if you have any thoughts on the LSB. I have to admit, after doing this, I'm a little bit more interested in the LSB, and I think I might keep an eye out for it in future. See you later.